Hello and welcome to Reigate Maths. My name's Simon, and in this video we're going to be looking at kind of broader functions, what they are, how we can use them, and how they might be used in an A-level exam question in the context of quadratic equations or quadratic expressions. This is focusing on the first year of the A-level maths, and there's much more information on functions generally in the second year content. You can find the video linked below if you are interested. For those of you who are seeing this for the first time, don't worry about that until your second year. So you should be hopefully familiar with function notation from GCSE, things like f of x, g of x, h of x, etc. You can use any letters you like, really, to describe a function. One of the things that you probably won't see in the first year, but may see in the second year, is a function written like this. Let's say like x squared plus 2. So this is just an alternate way of saying f of x equals x squared plus 2. It's a different style. So this is the same as, f of x is x squared plus 2. It's a different style of writing it, and it kind of means a different thing. It's quite nuanced, but on the whole, you don't need to worry about it. For the A-level, you just need to know that these are broadly equivalent. Now, this is something called a mapping description, which is distinct from a function. That's what you look at in the second year. So functions-wise, if we continue looking at this one, f of x equals x squared plus 2. There are properties of functions that we're going to look at very briefly, but again, goes into more detail in the second year. Now, we can think of this as a set of instructions. We take an x value, we then square it, we then add 2, and we get an answer, or a y value, or an f value. The set of x's that we can put into the function is known as the domain of a function, and the set of answers that we could possibly get is the range. Now for quadratics, we've already looked previously at completing the square. We'll look at another video of graphs of quadratics, but the range is found by the y coordinate of the vertex. So in this case, the y coordinate or the vertex is 0, 2, all of our answers are going to be 2 or above. So in this case, our range would be y is greater than or equal to 2. This is kind of the background of what a function does. This is one of the first topics in the second year content. What we're going to look in this video is more using these in the context of quadratic equations and looking at kind of how these might get asked in an exam question. So here's our first example. We've got two functions, f of x equals 2x minus 10, and g of x is x squared minus 9, and we've got a couple of examples here. Now notice this written here, you might see this written quite often next to a function. This is the domain. And for a lot of these questions, particularly in the first year, we don't need to worry about it. When you come to the second year questions, whenever you're defining a function, you do need to pay attention to the domain, just to make sure that the answers that you're getting work with that domain. So find the values of f of 5 and g of 10. So this should hopefully be relatively straightforward. When we are putting a number or anything inside a function, we're taking the x in this case and replacing that with 5. So we get 2 times 5 minus 10, which is 10 minus 10, which is 0. So in this case, we've got that f of 5 equals 0. This tells us that x equals 5 is a root, or is a solution to that equation. And this is quite a useful property if you're doing this style of question here. We're going to now do g of 10. So we're going to get 10 squared minus 9. 10 squared is 100, minus 9 is 91. Great. This tells us nothing. All this tells us is that, well, it doesn't tell us nothing. It does tell us that the x-coordinate, 10, gives us the y-coordinate, 91. That tells us that that lies on the curve y equals x squared minus 9, which could be useful information. Now part B, find the values of x for which f of x equals g of x. So f of x is 2x minus 10, g of x is x squared minus 9. We're solving this equation. So we've got a quadratic, we rearrange, plus 1 equals 0. Now in this case, we can look to see, can we factorize, can we complete the square, etc. This one does factorize. X minus 1 all squared equals 0. So x equals 1. So we have one point of intersection between these two curves. So this next example is a quite typical exam question. The function f is defined by this function. We've got our domain here. Again, we're broadly going to ignore that for the purposes of this example. Write f of x in the form x plus p squared plus q. Well, what does this actually mean? Well, we've got a quadratic, and this is completed square form. Which means we need to complete the square. And that's all that this question is asking us to do. It's just in the context of functions. So we've got f of x equals x squared plus 6x minus 5, and then all we do is complete the square, like we've done in previous videos. Now part B, hence or otherwise. So hence or otherwise means use A is probably the best way to do it, but if you have a different way, then fine. But the hence, even if it says or otherwise, hence means the best way you're going to do this is by using part A. Now it says find the roots, so we need to set up an equation that we can solve. Remember, the thing that we've got here, this is not an equation, that's an expression. So we are solving f of x equals 0. Now we need to show that we're using our hence, so let's write down the thing we got for part A equals 0. And then it's just a case of solving like we've done in previous videos. Rearranging both sides, plus or minus the square root, x is minus 3 plus or minus root 14. Write down the minimum value of f and state the value of x for which this occurs. Well, again, this comes from completed square form. We're looking at the vertex of this graph. This graph looks like this, where the vertex is minus 3 minus 14. So the minimum of f of x is minus 14 when x equals minus 3. It's just the same things that we've done in previous videos with completing the square, just written in a different context. And this is something that you need to be able to contend with in A-level maths, is it might be written in a way that you're not used to, but just distilling it down to, well, what maths am I actually doing? They're never going to ask you something you haven't been taught. Okay, they're never going to ask you something that's not on the specification. They just might ask it in a slightly strange way, which is what this has done here. This doesn't tell us to complete the square. It implies it from saying it's in this form. It tells us to solve this quadratic equation, again, just in a different way. And it tells us the form we want it, surd form, which we've done. And then finding the vertex. Again, asking it in a slightly different way, but it's still all the same maths we're used to. That's it for this relatively short video of looking at quadratic function context questions.